Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to have Richard Kerris here with me today. He is the VP of the Omniverse platform at NVIDIA. We are going to talk about industrial virtual worlds. I'm especially excited to hear from him on what will drive real revenue growth, as well as the topic on every investor's mind, which is the size of the addressable market, and what exactly CEO Jensen Huang meant when he said the Omniverse or the Metaverse is going to be a new economy that is larger than our current economy. I personally perked up when I heard him say that, so I can't wait to hear what Richard has to say about it. I'll give you kind of the Wikipedia background on Richard, and then I'll let him expand on the intro for his bio. Richard has an impressive background. He worked under the tenure of Steve Jobs at Apple. He worked on creative products that span film, video, and digital imaging, such as Final Cut Pro, Aperture, and Logic. He's also was previously the CTO of Lucasfilm, which I'm especially interested in hearing about because we've seen so much M&A activity between Hollywood and gaming companies. And then, Richard, I would love to hear more about what you're doing at NVIDIA currently.
Sure. Well, thank you. Very nice to be here virtually. Yeah, I've had a wonderful background. I think it's led me to the point where we're at right now. From actually early days at Pixar to now has all been around, the creative process and creating things, whether it's movies, visual effects, things like that, and the pipelines that make those things happen. So, yeah, been a lot of fun.
Great. Yeah, I actually remember, I think it was 2013 or 2014 when the big headline was gaming surpassed Hollywood on market size. So it's interesting to see those two industries really join forces with this virtual worlds. I'd love to go right to the heart of the question that I think is on investors' minds, which is addressable market, total addressable market. That's usually where investors start, and then they work backwards. And in general, could you maybe help break down some walls as to how big this market can be exactly?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is the analogy of when we went from just the early days of the internet to what we're now the World Wide Web. I think in those early days, once we started connecting things, we didn't realize just how big it could be. And there was, if you remember, in the very early days, there was the dot-com boom, and things then didn't sync right away, and then came back, and then we have the web. Well, one of the things that happened in that time was HTML. HTML allowed for a consistent plumbing or a consistent connective tissue between the websites. So you didn't have to have a specific browser and an extension installed and all the things that in those early days were quite cumbersome. Now we just go from one website to another and the videos play the same, the text is great, the images, etc. We don't even think about any of that stuff. We're just concerned about the content that we're going to the website for. Much of the same kind of thing is going to happen with these virtual worlds. And that's why there's so much excitement about them, because once you can teleport from one world to another world, and the experience of those worlds is really about what the content is versus the lighting and the materials and how things behave in those worlds, we're going to see some really tremendous opportunities take place. And I think it's going to be many times bigger than what we are experiencing today with the web, because if you think about it, what a virtual world can do for business, for education, for medical, for all sorts of things, including entertainment, we have just begun to scratch the surface of these possibilities. So to your specific point, like addressable market, there's many ways to slice that up. But one I'll start with is just what it's going to do to revolutionize the industrial market for development, design, and manufacturing. You probably have heard the term digital twin. Well, a digital twin is a true to reality twin in the synthetic world to what's happening in the physical world. And we're already seeing that start to transform these things. Why? Because when you can make decisions in that synthetic world before you have to commit to them in the physical world, you can have a lot of cost savings. But you can also do other things in that world as well. Train your robots, understand how people are going to move around in a factory and things like that. We have a wonderful example that we've been working with BMW, where they've built a complete digital twin of their factory, complete with the robots, over 300 CAD accurate cars, digital humans moving around in the factory. And the reason that they did that is because for a company like them that's making 2.5 million cars a year, anytime that their production isn't producing a car, it's costly. And when they transfer from one type of a model to a different model on that factory floor, machines have to be moved, the parts that come in, the people that work there, the robots have to be retrained and things like that. And when they would only do that in the physical world, it would affect production because sometimes the decisions weren't accurate. They have to move things or something like that. Now they can do all of that stuff in the synthetic world before they commit to anything in the physical world. So they've seen savings up to 30% just in the entire process. That comes from not only the decision making, but also the robot training. Because if you have a digital twin of a robot, you can have hundreds of robots being trained at the same time, and then deploy that out to the physical robot, and it'll have everything it needs to do right away. And that's just one example, but we're going to see many types of things like that, where it's going to be cost savings, it's going to be safer for the employees, it's going to give more iterations on design and things like that. So we're really excited about this.
Great. And I know that your company has talked quite a bit about the factory of the future. And when we look at things like that with BMW, can you help us understand timing for real revenue growth? I've heard 5 years, I've heard 10 years, yet your professional visualization revenue segment does quite well. Unity's Create segment is already starting to show some growth. So, in some regard, we're seeing movement now, but there's others that are saying we're 5 to 10 years out. Anything you can do to, discuss and elucidate where the
Yeah.
timing would be?
Well, it's a long road ahead, but we are seeing things happening now. We are seeing it with customers like BMW and others that we're working with. We're working with designers who are designing and understanding the fabric for the products that they're making in the synthetic world, for the physical world and things. So we're already starting to see these things start to transform. And I just think it's going to get more and more, a part of the fabric of this industrial revolution, if you will, as we move forward. So there's things already happening today. We use it. We simulate everything we build. Everything that moves is going to be autonomous. So we train things in the synthetic world, whether it's our robots or it's autonomous driving, things like that. But we can do all of those studies in that space before we commit to the build and things like that. So whether it's what does the product look like, or how is the heat going to be dissipated over it, or how's it going to look in its final form, all of those decisions are made in a synthetic environment before we commit to anything in the physical environment. And we're not unique. Lots of our customers are doing similar things.
In that comment that Jensen Wang had made during the keynote, where the virtual economy would, exceed and be larger than our current economy, can you help us understand what he really meant by that? Because it's obviously quite a statement to make.
Yeah, well, if you think about the impact, back to the analogy of the web and how much has taken place since the web got going, and now some of the biggest companies in the world are completely web-based. There's going to be lots of things like that that take place in these virtual worlds. People will have, items that they buy in the digital world. It'll be much easier to have property in the digital world or content in the digital world. The different types of revenue models that are going to be out there, whether it's, from the entertainment perspective or the designer's perspective. There's lots of things that we look at and we say, yeah, this is going to be many times larger than what the web is.
In a previous editorial for Forbes, actually, I said that could be the Steve Jobs moment where we, kick off this metaverse market, really. So we'll see if that comes true. I would love to switch gears just for a minute and ask what is the metaverse and virtual worlds exactly? Maybe you could start by telling us, who will be the first to live in the metaverse?
Yeah. So what is the metaverse? I know it's a term that's been used so much, especially the past few months, but in its simplest form, it's simply a description of virtual worlds. And you can think of it in that context. Now, those virtual worlds can be all kinds of things. Some of the ones I've talked about, they can be social worlds, they can be entertainment. We're seeing, virtual concerts, we're seeing all sorts of things. But the reality is that they're those connected virtual worlds, like in the connected websites, is really what's the revolution that everybody's excited about. Now, living in the metaverse or living in these virtual worlds, I don't know that you'll live in them as much as you'll experience them when you want to, whether you're working, having fun, exploring a remote location, a student learning about a foreign land, or maybe you're going to go on a resort trip and you want to go experience it beforehand. So you'll go into these worlds and have that kind of experience. But it's not the Ready Player One thing. I think that everybody feels like we're going to be strapped in helmets and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, you can do virtual reality in those worlds, and it's wonderful. And there's augmented reality, which I think is going to be a real big opportunity for so many areas. But you'll experience it through the computer screen like you and I are talking right now, but it'll just be a 3D environment, much in the same way kids are playing 3D video games and stuff like that. You'll use your tablet to peer into a world if you're looking at the design of a new automobile and you want to walk around it and see it and all things like that. So there'll be many ways to interface with these worlds, but you won't be strapped in, locked in, and living in the world in that kind of concept. You'll have fun in it much the same way you do with web experiences today.
Do you think people will really buy real estate, uh, virtual real estate, virtually, so
Sure.
to speak?
I think, when people ask me about will I buy digital content and real estate and all those things, I take it down to a really simple form. I say, do you buy music today online? Yeah. Do you buy movies online? Yeah. Where are they? Well, they're online. Oh, so you've actually been buying digital content that exists someplace other than in the tangible world that you're in, and you don't think twice about that. Why wouldn't you buy a location that you might share, like you have a social site that you share with somebody or a personal website, things like that? You might have an environment. Come on into my environment. I want to show you around. Maybe it's a studio, maybe it's a art gallery, or maybe it's just something you want to share with people and things like that. So yeah, we'll see those things. They're actually happening today. That we're just kind of thinking about it more in the 2D world. The representation today is like a 2D piece of paper or an image. So you think of it in that context, but you're buying music or you're buying websites and photos and blah, blah, blah. Think about it now in 3D. Why wouldn't you have those same kinds of things there? I think we will.
Great. I'd love to drill a little bit into how the metaverse will be built. One tool and framework, open source framework, is Universal Scene Description from Pixar. Can you go into the software platform that is being used to construct those 3D models, and what is the importance of Universal Scene Description?
Yeah, Universal Scene Description, or USD. You can think of it as the HTML for 3D. So you remember when I was talking about how the web, really got revolutionized when the plumbing was consistent. USD is going to be that consistent base, the foundation that unifies these things in much the same way HTML did. And we've been building our platform Omniverse to be a platform that connects these virtual worlds, whether you're creating or connecting and things like that. And we do it by not trying to replace what's already being done, but instead we enhance and extend it. So whether you're a 3D creator or a 3D designer or an architect, you can connect into Omniverse via USD. And once you're there, we have over 20 years of NVIDIA technology that we bring into play, whether it's AI technology or multi-GPU rendering and things like that. And it allows you to just go further than what you've been doing, as well as to work with other products that may not have talked well together. And most importantly, work with other people, whether it's across the room or across the globe. This unifies this connective world so that you and I can be in a virtual world working on something together. You might be building one part of it, I might be designing another part of it, things like that. But we'll be connected in much the same way we're connected right now in a video conference, right? But we'll be in the 3D world together.
Do you think it'll be, you talked about HTML, do you think it'll be developers that push forward, the build the metaverse, or creators, or both, or how do you think of that?
Well, it always starts with developers. They're the ones building the tools. They're the ones that are enabling the democratization of challenging tasks and things like that. And then it's the people that take advantage of those tool makers, and can build things with it. And so, yes, it starts with the developers, and then there'll be all kinds of people creating, whether it's creators or designers or architects. There'll even be more of a way for just anybody to create content in these 3D worlds, because one of the key things that's taking place right now is the democratization of the challenges of creating 3D. Another analogy I like to use is when music started to get sampled. You could sample a sound, or you could auto correct a voice and things like that. You started to use technology to make it easier to create and easier to do things in music. Right now, you can use your mobile device and you can scan a 3D object or a 3D environment, and it's in USD. And so you can just drop it into the world that you want to do. So we're going to see a lot more people being able to say, oh, I like that object. I want to scan it in. I want to do something with it, or I want to see that furniture in my room, or I want to, all those types of things you'll be able to do. And it's already starting to happen right now. There's thousands of applications that are taking advantage of scanning and manipulating and stuff. Once we connect that tissue for these 3D worlds, we're just going to see these things boom.
Yeah, and on that note, it's interesting that you described it that way. We are seeing, quite a few different companies get into this space. Game engines, social media. Disney just discussed the metaverse on their earnings call. When I think about NVIDIA and the fact that NVIDIA was a hardware company that has also now become a software company, how does that help position NVIDIA when we think about the landscape?
Well, I think the beautiful thing is we've been working with all these companies already, and what we're doing is with all of these companies as we do it. We're not trying to build a walled garden. We're not trying to build our version. We support a lot of the different formats that people use, but a lot of them are now coming to USD. So whether it's companies like Adobe or Autodesk, and even Apple supports USD on all their devices. So these worlds are getting connected in that plumbing concept. And it's not going to be a question of which one. It's going to be, where do I want to go? It might be into a game engine world. It might be into a factory world. It might be into all kinds of things. As long as they can connect, you're going to see the success of this take off.
And I do feel like you might be one of the best companies to ask, where does AI and the metaverse intersect?
Well, as I said, AI helps us to do a number of different things, democratizing some of the challenges of creating objects or communicating, things like that. We've got wonderful technology that allows for better experiences in these worlds and better ways to create the content for those worlds. So AI is a tool, and it's a tool that can be used in many different ways. So we're seeing AI-driven avatars. So perhaps you wanted to go into a virtual world and you want to talk to a find out something about that world. You might have a digital avatar teaching you about it, things like that. It can go much further. We can use AI to do simulations and things like that. So like some of these virtual worlds that are being done to understand what takes place. Like Lockheed Martin is using a digital twin to understand the wildfire challenges that we have, especially out here in the West. And they're using AI to understand the simulation of what takes place before and after the fire starts and how to best contain it and eventually eliminate it. So there's all different ways. It's another tool that you'll have access to, and it'll be another part of that fabric of the kinds of things that you can do.
Great. And I know ray tracing was something that NVIDIA had developed and actually released maybe 2, 3 years ago. I feel like I heard quite a bit about ray tracing hitting the gaming world
Yeah.
and the RTX platform. I would love to hear more about the light simulation and just how that has allowed you guys to simulate, virtual worlds internally and what you see happening, with your customers there with real-time simulation.
Yeah, there was the kind of the big boom moment that took place for all of these things to happen. And the first part of that was RTX, which is real-time ray tracing on a chip. And it was announced at SIGGRAPH in 2018. And it was really a milestone that we will forever remember, as much as like the early days of computer graphics when we got to color and Phong shading and all of those things, to go to ray tracing, which enables photorealistic rendering to happen in real time. That means the virtual worlds that we're talking about look more and more indistinguishable from the real world. And that's one of the key things that's happening there. USD is another part of that boom. And just the ability for these things to come together is magnificent. And it was such a moment at NVIDIA when that happened. And I remember the enthusiasm from the computer graphics community, because for those of us that have been in it a long while, we dreamed of it 30 years ago. And we actually had some of the founders of some of those companies that I've worked at reach out to us and say, you guys are achieving a dream that we had many years ago. And it was just, we knew it was that impactful of a moment.
Great. And I would love to drill even deeper into a comment that you had made around the plumbing and the connective tissue of the metaverse. I've also heard people discuss a persistent experience, a persistent reality, virtual reality. I would love to hear anything else you could add to that, because my understanding is that's, like you said, it's similar to HTML or persistent experience on internet. Anything else you want to add there before we move on?
Yeah, well, there's lots of 3D virtual worlds today. So what makes the term metaverse and the excitement so much more ambitious for tomorrow? And it's because we realize if we can have those virtual worlds be as consistent as it is from one website to another, that means no matter what world I want to go into, I might teleport into a virtual concert, and I might teleport then into the factory where I might be working on and things like that. The consistency is what's going to make that all come together. And that's what we mean about that connective tissue, that plumbing. Once you have that foundation, it's really, it's limitless what you can do with it. In much the same way we have with the web today. Who would have thought just 20, 30 years ago that the web would be such a part of our daily life today, whether it's a mobile device, a computer, it's how we work, it's how we communicate, it's how we watch movies or get entertained, all of those kinds of things. It's just become part of our fabric of life. And I think these virtual worlds are going to have much similar type of an impact on us. We'll just take it for granted.
Great. I would love to move on more to the industrial side. Industrial virtual worlds, basically. And one thing you had already touched base on, I'd love to hear more about, is all of the partnerships, all of the companies in this ecosystem. How it won't just be one company, building this metaverse. Can you talk about the ecosystem? We hear about Autodesk, Unity, Epic. Boy, I mean, I could go on and on. Would love to hear how you view the ecosystem, especially how it relates to, the industrial side.
Sure. And all of those companies we have connections to for the platform, which is the most important thing. They've been longstanding partners, and they build amazing tools and technology for the communities out there. From the industrial standpoint, as I gave the example earlier, from the standpoint of what's taking place, like with BMW and things, we're seeing all of these types of companies, whether they're designing cars or whether they're designing, clothing, fabrics. We have one customer that's been using the platform to design clothing for actors and actresses, because it's so much cheaper for them to have a digital double in a digital twin environment to do all of the fittings and do all of the look devs and stuff like that before they have to commit to the actor and actress being on location and doing things like that. So there's wide spectrum of use cases, but a lot of our customers that are doing things, we've had over 700 of enterprise customers helping in the evaluation as we were in early access for Omniverse for Enterprise. It released a few months ago now, but we also have Omniverse General, which is a free version of Omniverse that anybody can download, and that went into general availability early last month. So a wide spectrum of use cases, and I could kind of dig into any one of those examples if you'd like.
Sure, I would love to hear more. You've talked about BMW, but let's just use BMW, I guess, as a case study in this example. My understanding is one big issue with automation, especially with autonomous vehicles, is that by the time that they deploy on the road, something happens that they're not expecting, that they haven't been trained for, and we have an accident, we have something that gets into the headlines. So I understand that there's the factory of the future, so I'd love to hear about that too. And then anything in regards to automation that you're actually seeing happen from customers or on the industrial side today.
Well, let me start with that. The example of the autonomous driving, right? Because we all are excited about it, and everybody's kind of like, really, do I want the car to drive itself? How do I know it's going to make the right decisions and stuff? And it's coming. But one of the things that as you alluded to, it has to be trained. It has to understand the roads. It has to understand the different predicaments that might happen. The ball rolling out in the street and the child running after it or something, or weather conditions, or all kinds of things. Typically the way these cars were being trained is that you would see them around on the roads. They'd have a thing on the roof, and they'd be scanning, and they'd be, bringing in data and all of that through cameras and LiDAR and et cetera. But that's kind of a slow process to go on. Now, if we go back to the concept of a digital twin, the digital twin doesn't have to be a factory. It can be a city. We have companies like Ericsson that has built digital twins of cities just to do antenna propagation for the 5G networking and stuff like that. But we've been using digital twins in that environment to have a synthetic world that these cars can be trained on. That's indistinguishable from the real world. It's exactly the way things are laid out, but you can have many cars being trained in that world at the same time. And what's most important is you can throw all kinds of different predicaments at it so that it learns whether it's that ball rolling out, as I said, or other things that they might encounter that those cars in the analog world may never have encountered. So the assumption that that autonomous driving vehicle would know exactly what to do, how confident would we be versus a car that's been thousands of hours in a synthetic world that's indistinguishable from the real world and has every kind of predicament thrown at it. Is much higher degree of confidence that that's going to know what to do and how to respond.
Great. And I know you had talked about the factory of the future and just some of the ways that the Omniverse or Metaverse can actually drive down costs. Are there any other customer case studies beyond training for deployment of an autonomous vehicle or autonomous robot, really? And then obviously the factory driving down costs. Are there other key takeaways or ROI from Metaverse?
Yeah, well, you'll hear a bunch more at our upcoming
Okay.
GTC. There's a plug, but next month in March we'll have our GTC conference. But there's been other companies that we've talked about, like Ericsson, with that example of a digital twin to understand how to propagate the antennas for 5G. Huge cost savings for them because it allows them to know how weather is going to affect the antenna or what kind of maintenance they would need to do depending on where it's at. We have partners that are building products on the Omniverse platform, like Bentley. They're focused on digital twins for the kinds of customers that they work with, whether it's a power plant or things like that, because in their world, like so many others, when the facility is done being built, it starts its next life, meaning that it has to be maintained and it has to, you have to understand how to upkeep it and things like that. And it's very important when you're in some of those things like a power plant and other situations like that. So we're going to see more and more of these things taking place where the understanding of what's taking place in the physical world will be, you'll be ahead of the game by knowing it in the digital world and be able to predict and make decisions ahead of time. So there'll be cost savings there as well.
Great. Richard, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's a mind-blowing conversation, really, and your wealth of information, considering your background. And just really appreciate you taking the time to break down this particular market. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We will see you at GTC.
Excellent.
Thanks.